Some drivers race with skill, others race with secrets, and a few, they race with smoke bombs, missing bumpers, and basketballs in their fuel tanks. These are the wildest cheating scandals in racing history, and trust me, they don't teach this stuff in driving school. 12. Robby Gordon's Caution Flag Con. Robby Gordon didn't wait for luck to save his race. He took matters into his own hands, literally. It was the 2006 Bass Pro Shops 500 at Atlanta Motor Speedway. With 35 laps to go, Gordon was falling behind and needed a caution flag to regroup. Most drivers cross their fingers and hope someone else crashes. But Robby, he got creative. He reached up, grabbed a chunk of foam padding from his own roll bar, and chucked it onto the track like he was tossing a paper airplane. Not exactly subtle, but it worked. NASCAR officials spotted the debris, threw the yellow flag, and suddenly Gordon was right back in the mix. Now, if he had just shut up and played it cool, he might have gotten away with it. But nope. In the post-race interview, Robby gave a sly grin and casually suggested the foam might have come off the back of the car. That smirk was basically a confession with subtitles. NASCAR wasn't impressed. They launched an investigation, confirmed the foam was his, and came down hard. He was fined $15,000, docked 50 driver points, and lost 50 owner points too. 11. Ken Schrader's fire extinguisher smoke show. Most drivers depend on horsepower, pit strategy, and nerves of steel. But Ken Schrader? He threw in a fire extinguisher for good measure. It was the 1980s, and Schrader was racing on a small track in Washington State. With just a few laps left, his tires were shot and his lead was vanishing. He needed a miracle, or at least a distraction, so he reached for the unlikeliest item in his cockpit, the fire extinguisher. Now, nothing was actually on fire, but Schrader yanked the pin and blasted a huge cloud of smoke behind him, right in the faces of the drivers closing in. From their point of view, it looked like his engine was about to explode. Naturally, they hit the brakes, not wanting to plow into what they assumed was mechanical chaos. Schrader used the moment to his advantage, pulling away just enough to secure his position. When the smoke cleared, he was still rolling, cool as ever, and the best part? NASCAR didn't fine him. Technically, there was no rule at the time saying, "Thou shalt not weaponize your fire extinguisher." 10. Michael Waltrip's jet fuel fiasco. 2007, the Daytona 500. It was supposed to be a historic debut for Michael Waltrip racing in Toyota. Big team, big stage, big expectations, but instead of blazing a trail on the track, they lit up headlines for all the wrong reasons. Before the race even began, NASCAR officials noticed something fishy. Waltrip's fuel didn't look right, and it didn't smell right either. So they ran tests. What did they find? A banned fuel additive. Not just some mild performance enhancer, this stuff was borderline rocket fuel. If the car had taken flight, it wouldn't have been entirely shocking. NASCAR came down hard, a $100,000 fine, docked 100 driver and owner points, 2 crew members were suspended indefinitely, and just for good measure, they seized the intake manifold like it was the scene of a crime. Waltrip looked gutted. At the press conference, he seemed like a man who'd lost a bet, a race, and his lunch, all in the same day. He apologized publicly, admitted the whole thing shook him, and even considered backing out of the event. But he stayed in, qualified, raced, finished 30th. It should have been a milestone moment. Instead, it became a cautionary tale. The scandal eclipsed everything else. No one was talking about Toyota's NASCAR launch. They were all whispering about jet fuel recipes. In trying to boost his car's power, Waltrip torched his reputation instead. It was less performance gain and more public relations crash. 9. Bobby Allison's vanishing bumper. Let's rewind to the 1982 Daytona 500. Bobby Allison was tearing up the track, laser-focused and hungry for victory. Then, out of nowhere, something odd happened. His rear bumper just fell off, mid-race. No crash, no bump, no warning. Just clunk, gone. At first glance, it seemed like a fluke, a random mechanical issue, but on closer inspection, not so much. That bumper's disappearance may have been the smartest oops in NASCAR history. Why? Because losing the bumper reduced drag instantly, less weight, less air resistance, and more speed. On a track like Daytona, where every millisecond counts, that could be the difference between first and forgotten. And guess what? Allison won. Fans and fellow drivers were skeptical. The timing was too perfect. The car suddenly had better speed. And then there was crew chief Gary Nelson, a guy known for bending the rules into balloon animals. People started asking, was this bumper designed to fall off? NASCAR launched an investigation but couldn't prove intent. No hard evidence, so Allison kept the win. No fines, no suspensions, just a very suspicious trophy. Let's talk about the king, Richard Petty. 8. Richard Petty's monster motor and tire trick. Richard Petty, the king. 7 championships, 200 wins, and 1 engine that in 1983 crossed the line literally. At the Miller High Life 500 in Charlotte, Petty's car looked unbeatable. He was fast, smooth, and dominant. But once the checkered flag waved and the inspectors got to work, the car's secrets started spilling out like confetti at a victory party. First, the engine. NASCAR's legal limit was 351 cubic inches. Petty's car clocked in at 381. That's 30 cubic inches of whoops, which translates to a serious boost in horsepower and torque, especially on a high-speed oval like Charlotte. But Petty's team wasn't done there. They'd also swapped the left and right side tires. Why? Better grip in the turns. On a track where handling is everything, this meant the king had a throne that cornered like it was on rails. Now here's the twist. NASCAR didn't take the win away. Maybe because it was Richard Petty. Maybe because they didn't want to ignite a fan rebellion. Instead, they went for the wallet. $35,000 fine and the scoreboard. 104 points docked. That stung, but not as much as a stripped trophy would have. The message was clear. Even royalty has to play by the rules, or at least try to. Petty remained a legend, but the Miller High Life 500 win, that one came with an asterisk. And speaking of sneaky, the next driver figured out how to lighten his car in the middle of a race, without stopping, without tools, and without anyone noticing for a while. 7. Darrell Waltrip's lead shot weight loss. In racing, weight is everything. Less weight means more speed, better fuel efficiency, and an easier ride to victory. And in the 1980s, Darrell Waltrip's team figured out how to make weight vanish like a magic trick, right in the middle of a race. At the time, NASCAR only weighed cars before the green flag. No post-race checks, no mid-race weigh-ins. Just one inspection and you were good to go. So Waltrip's crew got inventive. They filled hollow sections of the car with lead shot, tiny metal pellets, dense enough to bring the car up to the minimum weight requirement. But once the race began, that weight became dead weight, literally. So Waltrip had a little lever under his seat. Mid-race, with no one watching, he could twist the rod and open a hidden hatch. Hundreds of pounds of lead would spill out onto the track like breadcrumbs behind a getaway car. Suddenly, the car was lighter. That meant faster acceleration, improved tire wear, and better fuel efficiency. In a sport where seconds decide glory, this kind of edge was huge, and the competition completely in the dark. The most impressive part? The system was incredibly well hidden. During pre-race inspections, NASCAR lifted cars using jacks placed under specific points of the chassis. 6. Junior Johnson's Ford Galaxy of illegal dreams. Junior Johnson was a racing outlaw. The man had moonshine in his veins and mischief in his wrench hand. And in 1966, at the Dixie 400 in Atlanta, he rolled up with a Ford Galaxy that looked more like it belonged on a runway than a racetrack. At the time, Ford was on the struggle bus in NASCAR, and there were whispers that officials were loosening the rules just a bit to keep them competitive. Junior heard those whispers and kicked the door wide open. His Galaxy was packed with borderline illegal mods, aerodynamic tweaks, suspicious bodywork, engine upgrades that definitely didn't come from the dealership. It was a Frankenstein's monster wrapped in Ford blue. Johnson didn't sneak in one or two tricks. He brought the whole toolbox. He qualified third and looked like a threat to dominate. But fate, or maybe karma, stepped in. A mechanical failure knocked him out of the race before he could even finish. Still, the damage was done. Other teams were furious. They didn't just feel outperformed, they felt betrayed. NASCAR had let a rule-breaking supercar onto the track, and now they had to answer for it. The uproar forced NASCAR to tighten inspections and reconsider how much leeway they were giving any manufacturer. Number 5, Jimmie Johnson's window of deception, Daytona 500 2006. Jimmie Johnson showed up with a fast car, a sharp crew, and a little tweak that raised a lot of eyebrows. A rear window that could subtly shift during the race. This wasn't some futuristic gadget, but the design allowed just enough flex to reduce drag on the straights. A small aerodynamic advantage, but in NASCAR, fractions matter. Less drag means more speed, and Johnson's team knew it. The modification wasn't legal, and they knew it wouldn't pass scrutiny. That's where crew chief Chad Naus came in with a backup plan. If Johnson won, he was supposed to back the car into the wall during the victory lap. Just enough contact to damage the rear window so no one would notice anything unusual during inspection. But NASCAR got to them before the race even started. Inspectors spotted the flexible rear window during qualifying and flagged it immediately. Naus was removed from the track and suspended for 3 races. The team was rattled but not ruined. Johnson still raced, and against the odds, without his crew chief and with extra eyes on his car, he powered through and won his first ever Daytona 500. It was one of those moments where everything should have fallen apart but didn't. The cheat got exposed, the team took the hit, and the driver still walked away with the win. In the end, Johnson didn't just outdrive the field. He survived the drama that came with bending the rules. The car may have been caught, but the checkered flag still went to the man behind the wheel. And now, from subtle window flexing to full-blown engine fireworks, let's talk about a race where the car exploded at the perfect moment. Number 4, the engine that timed its own death. Let's rewind to 1985. The Winston, a short, high-stakes, no-points-all-pride race with a fat prize and zero room for error. It was NASCAR's version of a shootout, and Darrell Waltrip came prepared with a car built for one thing: maximum speed no matter the consequences. He crossed the finish line first. Victory was his, the crowd was cheering, and then boom! His engine gave out in spectacular fashion right after the checkered flag. Not a lap later, not during the cool down, immediately. It looked suspiciously perfect. People started talking. Had his team, led by the ever-crafty Junior Johnson, built an engine designed to last just long enough? An overtuned beast that delivered every ounce of performance and then gave up the ghost the moment the job was done? Johnson was known for pushing limits, and this felt like a textbook move. Get every advantage you can, and if the engine doesn't survive the celebration lap, well, mission accomplished. When questioned, Waltrip kept it cool. He gave a vague response, something along the lines of, "Unbeknownst to me," which in racing circles loosely translates to, "We're not admitting anything, but yeah, you figured it out." NASCAR didn't penalize him. Technically, the engine passed the test that mattered most, getting across the finish line first. But it sparked a legacy of speculation that's lasted for decades. People didn't forget, they just couldn't prove it. Waltrip's win stood, but it also stood as a reminder that sometimes the most legendary performances are the ones held together by timing, luck, and a little smoke. Next up, we're headed to one of the most controversial crashes in NASCAR history. A spin so suspicious it needed its own scandal name. 3. Clint Bowyer's suspicious spin, aka Spingate. The year was 2013. The race? Federated Auto Parts 400 at Richmond. With the playoffs looming, tensions were high. Clint Bowyer was sitting mid-pack, and his teammate Martin Truex Jr. needed every last point to make the chase. Then, with just a few laps to go, Bowyer spun out. At first, it looked like one of those late race mishaps. Bad tires, a slick spot, maybe driver error. But something didn't add up. There was no contact, no sudden move. The car just slipped, gently, like it had decided to lay down and take a nap in the middle of the track. Ryan Newman, who was leading and on his way to punching his playoff ticket, lost position during the caution. Truex jumped up just enough to qualify, and that's when fans and NASCAR started asking questions. Then came the damning radio chatter. Moments before the spin, Bowyer's spotter was heard saying, "Is your arm getting tired?" It wasn't subtle, it wasn't clever, it was code, and everyone knew it. The spin wasn't accidental, it was strategic. NASCAR launched an immediate investigation and didn't hold back. Michael Waltrip Racing was hit with a $300,000 fine. Every MWR driver, including Truex, lost 50 points. Ty Norris, the executive who greenlit the move, was suspended indefinitely. But NASCAR wasn't done. To correct the damage, they added Jeff Gordon to the chase as a 13th driver, an unprecedented move that showed how serious this was. It was one of the most blatant examples of race manipulation in recent memory. In an era of high-tech scrutiny, Spingate proved that the oldest trick in the book, faking a crash, still had a place in the playbook. And now we go back even further to a time when fuel tanks had secrets, and the rulebook didn't see them coming. 2. The hidden fuel tank scam. The 1960s weren't just a golden era for muscle cars and sideburns. They were also prime time for some of NASCAR's most creative, greasy, and downright genius-level cheating. And at the top of that list, hidden fuel tanks. Race teams back then discovered a simple truth. More fuel meant fewer pit stops. And fewer pit stops? That meant more time on the track, less time idling, and better chances of winning. So what did they do? They hid extra fuel tanks all over their cars, inside roll bars, tucked behind dashboards, even inside the frame rails. We're not talking massive tanks here, just a few extra gallons. But in a sport where tenths of a second matter, that tiny edge could be everything. During inspections, the cars looked perfectly legal, but once the green flag dropped, they were carrying an invisible advantage that made pit strategy look like child's play. And soon, suspicion started to grow. Teams began accusing each other. Whispers turned to confrontations. Everyone figured someone else was cheating, and they were usually right. Eventually, NASCAR had to step in. They revamped the entire inspection process, banned alternative fuel delivery systems, and started checking every inch of a car like it was being smuggled across a border. The hidden fuel tank era was over. Well, mostly. Because even in a sea of rule benders, one man's tricks stood out above the rest. The man who turned loopholes into art. The godfather of racing mischief. You know his name. You knew he'd be on this list. Smokey Yunick. And his next move? It didn't just involve fuel, it involved a basketball and a masterclass in outsmarting the rule book. Number 1, Smokey Yunick and the inflated basketball. Smokey Yunick wasn't just a mechanic. He was an inventor, a provocateur, and a certified genius at finding and exploiting every loophole NASCAR had. His most infamous trick? A regulation-defying basketball inside a fuel tank. At the time, NASCAR had strict limits on how much fuel a car could carry. So Smokey found a workaround that was as simple as it was brilliant. He inflated a basketball inside the fuel tank during inspection. When officials measured the volume, it passed. They were only measuring the space that wasn't taken up by the ball. Once the car cleared inspection, Smokey would deflate the basketball and remove it, leaving extra room in the tank. More fuel meant fewer pit stops, and that meant more laps at full speed while competitors were stuck refueling. What made it legendary was that he didn't actually break a rule. The rulebook specified fuel tank volume, but it didn't say anything about inserting an inflatable decoy during inspection. Smokey used that silence like a weapon. Officials were stunned. They had no idea how to react until they realized they'd have to rewrite the rules just to stop him, and they did. His creativity forced NASCAR to overhaul how they inspect fuel systems, and to this day, his name comes up whenever someone finds a new creative interpretation of the rules. Smokey Yunick wasn't your average rule breaker. He was the guy who made NASCAR change the rules after the fact, because they simply hadn't imagined someone would try what he did. He turned cheating into performance art, Not because he wanted to break the sport, but because he understood it better than anyone. So what did we learn? That racing isn't just about going fast, it's about thinking fast too. Whether it's dropping lead out of your car, faking an engine blowout, or literally stuffing a basketball in your gas tank, these drivers rewrote the rule book. Some with finesse, others with fireworks. Which one blew your mind the most? Drop it in the comments. Smash that like button if you enjoy stories where racing meets heist film, and subscribe for more mind-bending motorsport madness. And remember, cheaters never prosper unless they cross the finish line first.